That night, when I took the wallet my husband had forgotten at home to the airport, I thought I was just doing my duty as an attentive wife. Upon arriving at the terminal, right at midnight, the driver of the rideshare I had ordered suddenly locked all the doors. With a tense voice, he said, "Do not get out here, please. Trust me." I froze and asked, "Why, sir?" He was pale with fear and only muttered, "You will understand in 5 minutes." I remained silent, trying to take deep breaths and obeying his words, never imagining that exactly 5 minutes later, 3 police cruisers would surround us completely. I never would have thought that night would end up changing my entire life. Before we start with the story, I'm going to ask you for something very quick. Hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. This way we can keep growing and bring you even more intense stories. The wall clock in the living room marked 12:15 at night. A cold, almost hostile silence reigned in the enormous house. Zaire had just finished tidying up the desk of her husband, Draymond, which had been left a disaster from the preparations for a supposedly improvised work trip. Draymond had said his goodbyes in a rush just an hour ago, claiming an urgent problem had arisen with the opening of a new branch of the company up north, and that he had to catch the first flight out in the early morning. Zaire, a devoted wife who rarely questioned anything, had only helped prepare his clothes and things without asking too many questions, because she trusted him blindly. During 3 years of marriage, Draymond had been the perfect husband to her. Hard-working, kind, and always sweet in his demeanor, he seemed like someone incapable of hurting her. When Zaire was about to turn off the office light, something black caught her attention under a pile of folders on the corner of the desk. She felt her heart drop when she recognized the object. It was Draymond's leather wallet. She picked it up immediately and checked inside. His ID, his main credit card, his debit card, and a thick wad of bills were all there. Zaire got nervous instantly. How was it possible that Draymond had left for the airport without his wallet? Without ID, he wouldn't be able to board the plane. Without cards or cash, he would have trouble during the trip. Immediately, images of him lost in the terminal, angry or even stranded because of that clumsiness, began to drill into her mind. Zaire ran to the bedroom to find her phone and called Draymond several times. The ringtone sounded over and over, but nobody answered. She thought perhaps he was in the car on the way to the airport, that he had his mobile on silent, or was talking to someone. That only increased her anxiety. She looked at the wall clock again. It was 12:20. Draymond's flight was scheduled for 2 in the morning. There was still time if she left immediately. They lived about 45 minutes from the airport if the traffic was clear. Zaire didn't drive at night because she suffered from glare blindness from oncoming headlights. And besides, the family chauffeur had gone home at sunset. Without thinking twice, she decided to order a rideshare through an app. With trembling fingers, she opened the app on her mobile. She had to take that wallet to him at all costs. She didn't want Draymond to get into trouble for something she could fix. After a few minutes of searching, the app indicated that a driver had accepted the trip. The name that appeared on the screen was Booker. The car was a black sedan, and it was very close to their gated community. He would arrive in about 5 minutes. Zaire quickly put on her hijab. She buttoned up a thick coat to protect herself from the freezing night air and clutched Draymond's wallet with such force that she seemed to be holding on to her own life. 5 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up in front of the gate. Zaire went out, locked up, and walked down to the street. She opened the back door of the car and settled into the seat. The air conditioning hit her face with an artificial cold that contrasted with the silence of the night. In the front seat sat a middle-aged black man with hair already graying at the temples. He looked at Zaire for barely a second through the rearview mirror. He had a sharp gaze, but an expressionless face. Zaire greeted him politely. She apologized for requesting a ride so late and explained that she had to go to the domestic departures terminal at the airport. Mr. Booker only nodded his head without turning around and started the car slowly, leaving the zone of luxury homes behind. A strange silence reigned inside the car. The radio wasn't playing. There was no light jazz, nor that small effort at conversation that many drivers make to break the ice. Only the sound of the engine and the friction of the tires on the asphalt could be heard. The sedan advanced along the almost empty highway, while the streetlights bathed the interior of the vehicle in a dim orange light. Zaire kept looking at her phone screen, hoping Draymond would return the call, but the screen remained black. She sent him a quick text to let him know she was on her way to the airport to bring him his wallet, but the message remained on "delivered" without a read receipt. She thought maybe his battery had died or that coverage was bad on the route to the airport. She tried to calm herself down, leaned her back against the seat, and tried to regulate her breathing. However, there was something in Booker's behavior that was starting to unsettle her. Zaire noticed that the driver was looking in the rearview mirror too frequently, checking both her movements and what was happening behind the car. Every few minutes, his eyes met hers in the reflection. That insistence made her feel uncomfortable. She adjusted her coat, hugged her purse where she had stored Draymond's wallet, and felt a pang of fear. Suddenly, all the news stories about crimes committed in rideshare cars she had read on social media came to mind. She was a woman alone, in the middle of the night, in a car with a stranger on a deserted highway. She tried to push those thoughts away, repeated prayers in silence, and told herself that surely Booker was just a serious, quiet, and tired man. To distract herself, Zaire turned toward the window. The tall buildings of downtown faded behind them, replaced by the darker open areas typical of the road leading to the airport. The car's speed was steady, neither too fast nor too slow. Booker drove with an almost exaggerated prudence, changing lanes over and over as if avoiding other vehicles, even though there was barely any traffic. An hour later, the intense lights of the airport began to glow in the distance. Zaire exhaled, relieved. She checked her phone. It was 1 o'clock exactly. There was still an hour left before Draymond's flight took off. She was convinced he would be at the check-in area, nervously looking for his wallet. She imagined his face of relief upon seeing her arrive with it, and smiled, feeling proud to be such an attentive wife. The car entered the airport zone. Booker seemed to be heading toward the usual departures area, where the lighting was bright, and there were always people coming and going. However, instead of stopping in front of the main lobby, he kept moving slowly until the very end of the passenger drop-off zone. That end was almost in darkness, with several streetlights burnt out, and it was much more solitary. Zaire frowned. She was about to ask the driver to stop at the central entrance, but her words froze when she saw Booker's expression in the mirror. The man's face was tense, beaded with cold sweat, as if he were holding his breath. The car stopped next to a large concrete column that separated the public zone from the VIP parking area. There was nobody outside, no sky caps, no other passengers, no visible security guards, only the darkness and the cutting wind of the early morning. Zaire felt goosebumps rise on her skin. Her instincts screamed that something was not right. She wanted to open the door as soon as the vehicle came to a full stop to run toward the illuminated interior of the terminal and find Draymond. She placed her hand on the handle and pulled, but the door didn't budge. She tried again with more force. Nothing. She tried to open the other side. The same. The doors were locked from the central control next to the driver's seat. A scorching panic invaded her chest. She began to gasp. She banged on the window to get the attention of anyone passing by, but the place remained deserted. Between sobs, she shouted at Booker, asking why he had locked the doors, demanding that he open them immediately. He didn't move. He gripped the steering wheel with such force that his knuckles had turned white. He didn't turn to look at her at any moment. His eyes were fixed on the dark sidewalk to the side of the car, as if he expected something terrible to emerge from there. Zaire broke down in pleas. She offered him money, jewelry, her purse, Draymond's wallet, anything as long as he let her go. It was then that Booker spoke with a deep voice, very serious and different from the beginning. "You are not getting out here, Zaire. I forbid it. Please believe me," he said, without taking his eyes off the exterior. Those words, instead of calming her, drove the terror even deeper. How could she trust a man who had her locked in a car in the middle of the night in front of an almost deserted airport? She broke down crying inconsolably and asked between sobs why he was doing this to her. Booker turned just a little. His features reflected genuine panic, but a steely determination shone in his eyes. He assured her that in 5 minutes she would understand everything, and that until then, her life depended on her not disobeying. Zaire's body began to tremble uncontrollably. She curled up in the back seat, hugging her purse, unable to decide if she should keep screaming or stay still to not provoke something worse. The seconds turned into eternities. Zaire fixed her gaze on the digital clock on the dashboard, watching as the minutes advanced in slow motion. 1, 2, 3. The silence inside the car was suffocating, while outside, the darkness seemed to hide a crouching predator. Booker kept watching the mirrors intently, as if monitoring an invisible enemy. When the counter changed to the 5th minute, the world shattered all at once. From the front and the back, 3 police cruisers appeared out of nowhere with sirens wailing and blue and red lights illuminating the forgotten corner of the terminal. They surrounded the sedan and blocked any exit. Zaire let out a stifled scream, convinced for a moment that they were coming to arrest the driver. She felt a glimmer of relief. She thought they had rescued her from a kidnapping. Several officers in bulletproof vests got out of the cars, armed with rifles. They moved with speed and military precision. Zaire ducked, fearing a shootout would erupt. She heard shouted orders over the loudspeakers, commanding someone to get down and surrender immediately. She closed her eyes and covered her ears, wishing for it all to end soon. But to her surprise, the police didn't aim at Booker's sedan. They passed right by, rounded the large concrete column next to the car, and pounced on a silhouette that was hidden in the darkness, exactly in the spot where the rear door would have been if Zaire had been able to get out. She dared to lift her head just a little. The officer subdued a man wrapped in a thick black coat with a cap pulled down to his eyebrows. The individual tried to struggle, but the numerical difference was overwhelming. They threw him to the ground and twisted his arms behind his back to handcuff him. From one of his pockets fell a folding knife and a handkerchief apparently soaked in liquid. An officer picked up the handkerchief with gloves and put it in an evidence bag. Even from the car, Zaire perceived a penetrating chemical smell that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Chloroform. At that moment, another officer opened the driver's door of the sedan from the outside and spoke to Booker through the window in a respectful tone, as if they knew each other from before. He informed him that the target had been detained and that the situation was under control. Booker nodded, finally letting out a sigh of relief, and deactivated the central lock. The click of the lock sounded like music of liberation to Zaire. Still trembling, Zaire asked what was happening and why they had caught that man. She didn't understand why the officers weren't arresting Booker, nor why they treated him with courtesy. The driver turned toward her calmly for the first time. His expression had changed. It was no longer that of a sullen stranger, but of someone looking at her with affection and respect. He introduced himself again, but this time not as a simple app driver. He told her his name was Booker, and that he had been the head of personal security for her late father, Mr. Langston. Zaire was left open-mouthed. She vaguely remembered that name from her childhood, the trusted man who had retired years ago. Booker explained that before dying, her father had secretly asked him to continue protecting her from afar because he had always feared someone would get close to her purely for financial interest. That very night, Booker had received intel that a plan to kidnap her had been set in motion. The man they had just arrested was a hitman hired to snatch her at the airport door. As soon as she set foot on the sidewalk, he would have immobilized her with that chloroform-soaked handkerchief and forced her into another vehicle. Zaire covered her mouth to suppress a scream. The idea that she had been seconds away from walking toward her own death left her frozen. Then, with a broken voice, she asked who could hate her enough to do something like that. Booker didn't answer with words. He raised his hand and pointed upward, to the second floor of the International Departures building, where the glass facade clearly revealed the illuminated interior. Zaire followed the direction of his finger and saw a very familiar figure. There was Draymond, her husband. He did not, however, have the face of a man distressed by the disappearance of his wife, but an expression reddened by rage and frustration.